And now, it's time for the Well-Read Llama with your host, author Erin Mifflin.
Hello, reading friends. The weather has become quite chilly here in southwestern Missouri. It's perfect for curling up and reading a good book. If you're looking for a good book to read, we're going to talk about some today that I highly recommend. Before we introduce our guest, I wanted to say how much I've enjoyed talking to these authors and helping you get to know them. If you want to stay in the loop about who I'll be talking to next, you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram at author Erin Mifflin. Today, I'm pleased to talk to Amanda Wen, an award-winning author, mom, and musician. Amanda is funny and personable and a good friend. Her books are amazing, and I'm always recommending them. I love her storytelling style, and she's tackled some really difficult subjects with grace, including eating disorders, interracial relationships, and reconciliation with birth parents after being abandoned. She always points to a God of grace who works even in these tough places. We'll talk a bit about her most recent release, which tackles what might be her most difficult subject yet. Hi, Amanda. It's great to have you here with us today.
It's great to be here, and congratulations on the show.
Thank you.
This is very exciting.
Yes, it is. So I wanted to ask you, have you always wanted to be a writer?
I always wanted to be a writer. I would say I have always kind of been a writer, but I haven't always wanted to be a writer. I started writing stories for fun, like basically as soon as I could hold a pen. And in elementary school and middle school, I had friends that also wrote stories, and we would write things together. But I didn't really think about it being a serious, career option because my other emphasis was music, and that's kind of where all of my college and grad school and professional experience was. But then when it was about a year before I had my oldest, so it's been 16 plus years now, I got a story idea, and I wasn't sure what to do with it. I think I had a dream, and I didn't know how it turned out, and the only thing I could think of to do was to sit down at the computer and write what I had dreamed and hope that I could finish the end of the story. And I did. And then my husband came home from work, and I'm still in my pajamas, and I'm still at the computer, and he looks at me and he goes, "What have you been doing all day?" And I said, "Well, I've been writing. I guess I'm a writer." And he goes, "Oh, okay, cool. What do you want to do for dinner?" He's very chill. He's the king of chill.
Yeah.
So it was then that I decided, hey, this is really fun, and I think I might actually want to pursue this.
Yeah, and then it was a bit of a journey, I know, because like you said, that was 16 or more years ago, and your first published book was when?
2021 was my debut. So 2008 to about 2016, I kind of kicked around ideas and wrote things in the proverbial desk drawer novels that everyone has.
Yes.
I have some of those that will probably never see the light of day, but as I've gotten more experience with publishing, some of the characters and some of the ideas from those have found their way into my published works. But yeah, it was a while before I got published, which is okay because that, a lot of people have that kind of story. Somebody told me once that writing moves at the speed of a glacier.
Right. It's definitely a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes, and I think I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but my agent submitted my first book for consideration for publishers while I was on vacation in Alaska, literally looking at a glacier.
Oh, wow. So you kind of got the real firsthand experience and the metaphorical experience at the same time.
It's almost like God saying, remember, glacier. Yes. I was not at the Indy 500. I was looking at a glacier.
That's right. I love that. That's fantastic. So you write something called split time fiction. And what is split time fiction, and what drew you to writing it?
Split time fiction is it's my agent says you have to write 2 books and you only get paid for 1, which that's a cynical way to look at it. I prefer to look at it as there's a story that happens in usually the contemporary era, and then there's another story that happens sometime in the past. I've read split times that are just a few years in the past. I've read split times that are set 300 or 400 years in the past, but there's usually some kind of idea or object. Frequently it's an object that links the 2 timelines, and typically it's the contemporary characters find something from some historical era and they start digging in, well, what is this? Well, who owned it? Well, what was their story? And then the past timeline is kind of that story unfolding. There's a lot of variations on that theme, but that's kind of nuts and bolts what split time is. If anybody has ever watched the TV show This Is Us, that is told in a split time format. You are hopping back and forth between timelines, but it is not time travel. Like, the same character doesn't like get in a time machine and all of a sudden go back and they're in the 1920s or whatever. It's usually it's two sets of characters that are interwoven together by some common thread. It's really fun.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what drew me to it. I started out writing contemporary romance was my genre, and it felt like it fit kind of, but I didn't really feel like, it felt like there was something missing. And then I didn't really want to write pure historical because I didn't want to have to do that much research. There are a lot of historical authors that love research, and I am not one of them. I research when I have to. I would like learning, but the research, I lose patience with it. So I was like, I can't do historical. That's too much work. So I just was like, well, I must be contemporary. And then I read Heidi Cheveroli's book, Freedom's Ring, which is her debut. And I was like, oh, I want to write this, because there's historical and there's contemporary. And just about when you get tired of being in one timeline, you're in the other one. And it's really cool. And I'm like, okay, yep, I found my home. This is what I want to write.
This is it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I know there is some real family history in your books. How much of it would you say, like, the historical is based on your own family history?
It kind of depends on the book. Like my debut, Roots of Wood and Stone, that is very, very heavily based on my family history. It was inspired by an 1800s farmhouse that is not far from where I live now, and actually some of my ancestors lived in that house for a while. So I grew up, my mom has chased our family history for probably 50 years now, and so I know a lot of stories from that. And my mom, I like to joke my mom is my research department, because she has the patience for the research.
Yes.
And so a lot of it is I've just grown up surrounded by these stories of our ancestors and knowing who they were and where they came from, and but it's just bare bones details. Like, they lived here for this amount of time, and then they moved here, and they lived here, and then this person died, and this other person moved. So you just get kind of the structural framework of the story, but then you're like, well, what was that like for them? What did they experience? What would they have been feeling? And a lot of my first book especially is just taking bare bones details of things that I know for sure were in my family history. Like, our past heroine, Annabelle, is based on an ancestor of mine. Her mom died when she was like 9 years old, and her father took her to live with an aunt and uncle rather than raise her by himself. And I was like, what would that have been like? That's just not really a thing that happens today, but it was very common back then. So in Roots of Wood and Stone, Annabelle has that same backstory, and then I'm able to explore, her growing up knowing that these people weren't her parents, and knowing that her mom died when she was young, and all that. And then the past hero is inspired by another ancestor of mine who immigrated from Ireland and moved to Sedgwick County, Kansas, and lived in the house that is still standing. It's like 3 miles from my current house. So that's fun. So that one's really, really heavily based on my family history. And then other books, like the sequel, The Songs That Could Have Been, it really is just a germ of an idea. My dad has a cousin who dated someone, my whole family is white, and this cousin dated someone who was Hispanic, and this was back in the 1950s, and both sides of both sets of parents were very, very against it, and they didn't wind up together. Well, fast forward, 60 years, and I'm married to someone who is not white. My husband's family is from China. And my family, his family, nobody had a problem with it. And I just was kind of marveling at, what would it have been like if we had met in a different time, when it wasn't no big deal, when both sides of the family would have been opposed to it. So but it's just the germ of an idea, just the interracial relationship in a time when those were not accepted. And go from there. So that's book 2. And the third one, The Rhythm of Fractured Grace, that is another one that is based pretty heavily on my family history. The past heroine in that book survived being scalped. And that literally did happen to, I think I figured out, my 10 times great-grandmother. She was attacked. Her whole family was attacked. Most of them were killed. She and her sister survived, but they had both been scalped. And my ancestor lived to be like 65 and had 10 kids. And, you know, she was kind of a warrior princess, I think. But it's like, I didn't know that anybody ever survived that. And most people didn't. But, like, okay, when I heard about her, I was like, I got to write a book about her. That's cool.
Yes. There was so much in that book, you know, that, I mean, like you said, you don't really think about people surviving that, much less what it would entail. You know, you talk about her taking care of her wound, even though it's been years since it happened, but she still has, you know, medical issues that she deals with because of it and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's not even leaving alone the emotional and spiritual and all of those things that you would go through if you had experienced something like that.
Yeah, that was, well, I don't want to say it was fun to explore. It was rewarding to explore.
Yes.
But it was, a lot of that research was like, okay, I'm in over my head. My husband is medical. He is not easily grossed out. I am the opposite.
Yeah.
So it's like Google searching scalping survivors. Like, okay, I don't know that I want to write this book anymore, but I did.
Oh, wow. And then also, you are a musician, and I know at least one of the books has quite a musical story through it. So how about the others?
See, well, we can just go back to the beginning. All of my characters, all of my books have characters who are musicians. I didn't really plan that, especially when I was writing Roots of Wood and Stone. I am a seat of the pants writer. I don't plot out my whole entire book before I start writing it. I envy the people who can do that. I am not one of them. And I had gotten to about chapter 4, and I felt like I had no idea. I'm writing a financial planner and a museum curator. And I'm like, I don't know you guys. I don't know how your brains work. I feel stuck. Hey, how's an idea? How about one of you is a jazz singer as a hobby, and the other one really likes jazz? What do you guys think about that? And they took it and ran with it. And I said, cool. So that's the first book. I have my hero, Garrett, is a jazz aficionado. And my heroine, Sloan, she's a museum curator, but she is in a jazz combo, and she sings at, jazz clubs as a hobby. So that's book 1. The second one is very much more music oriented. Both past and present timeline feature characters who are musicians. Present, they were in high school music theater together. It's a second chance romance, and they met at a music theater camp in high school, and they were together for a little while, and it didn't work out, and then they run into each other randomly as adults. So they have kind of a musical background. Neither of them is a professional musician. Past timeline, the heroine and the hero meet in high school choir, and the hero is a gospel pianist without equal. He is so talented, and I really liked writing those scenes with him because I'm not a gospel pianist, but I am a pianist, and so I could kind of like, okay, I know what his hands are doing, I know what he's doing, I know what this music would sound like, and then trying to describe it was a fun challenge for me, because a lot of times there's a quote that my coworker has up in his office, music, like where words fail, music steps in or something. And yeah, so where words fail, music steps in, except when you have to write what the music sounds like. And as far as the third book, Rhythm of Fractured Grace has a character. The hero is a worship pastor. He's a guitar player, singer, your standard guy in a flannel shirt on a church stage with a guitar. And the heroine, she has played violin. She hasn't played it for a while, but she works on string instruments. She is a luthier, which is fancy word for somebody who works on and sometimes builds string instruments. So like violins, violas, cellos, she fixes those. And my next book has choir again, because that's my day job.
Right.
That's right what you know.
Yes. Yep, and I did want to talk a little bit about your most recent book, The Rhythm of Fractured Grace, which is up for a Christie Award. Congratulations again about
Thank
that.
you.
Yes, I'll definitely be cheering for you
Thank
when
you.
they have the announcements. Um, but one thing that I liked about that is it looks at a subject that is very difficult to tackle. It's kind of one of the darker aspects of Christianity, which is abuse within the church, and specifically the Church Too movement. So, what
Mhm.
drew you to write about that?
I think it was a couple of different. I mean, I was on Twitter when the Me Too and the Church Too hashtag were floating around, and I think I was just kind of shocked at how much abuse there is within the church. My pastor from a previous church always said, every church is full of sinners, and they have a sinner for a pastor, which is not an excuse in the slightest. It's just something that we have to remember. Nobody in this building is perfect, and so the high standard that we hold ourselves and other people to, it's kind of extra devastating when the abuse comes from someone who is supposed to know better and do better. I was molested when I was 4 years old by a Sunday school teacher, and that probably has something to do with why I was drawn to the Church Too movement and why this kind of spoke to me. I didn't really want to write my exact story,
Right.
but Siobhan goes through, she has a boss who is inappropriate with her, and he just happens to be the pastor of the church where she's working. And I think a lot of times we think that Christians are above this, but they are not. And what I wanted to call attention to was kind of the culture of, and I've seen this in a variety of ways at a variety of churches for a variety of reasons. A lot of it, people just sweep the negative stuff under the rug because, oh, well, we're reaching people for Jesus, so the ends justify the means. Well, no, they don't. I mean, yes, you have people that are hearing the gospel at these churches, perhaps, but if it's an abusive church, if it is a toxic church, you've got just as many people, if not more, who are being wounded, who are being hurt, and their faith is suffering as a result. And that's not okay. And I'm glad that survivors are starting to speak out and to tell their stories because, it does happen at church too, far more often than it should. But the only way that we can fix it, the only way we can stop it from happening is if people bring it into the light and say, hey, this is happening and this is not okay.
Right. And I know you handled that. I thought you handled that with great sensitivity. And I know you had readers who, read it before and gave you feedback. And you worked really hard to get the right message across with the book.
Yeah, and I am grateful for all of those. I was making fairly large scale changes even at the copy edit and the page proof phase, which they don't really like it when you do that when they're your publisher, but they knew why I wanted to make the changes and they were okay with it. And, I'm grateful that they were willing to do the extra work to make sure that the message got across clearly and the way that I wanted it conveyed.
Right.
So, and I'm grateful for my endorser that responded. She's like, hey, I have concerns about this and this. And I'm like, oh, yep. Okay. Well, if you're seeing that, then somebody else will too. So let's fix it now.
Yes. And like I said, I thought you did a good job with that. So
oh, thank you.
I hope that it continues.
Big relief.
Yes. I hope that it continues to touch hearts and get the message across.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I hope so too.
And so I know you just recently finished your latest manuscript, and you mentioned that it's about choir. Do you want to give us a little sneak peek about that?
Yes. It does not have a title yet. I don't even have a working title for it because I don't give my books working titles anymore because Kriegel does such an amazing job with real titles that I'm like, this is brain juice. I don't need to spend on this. So I'm calling it Book 4 or the choir book. But it is another split time, and it's got a little bit more mystery suspense aspect to it. It centers around the contemporary hero and heroine are a high school choir director and an accompanist. This is based on my situation, but not anybody that I work with. My choir directors that I've worked with, both of them have been happily married. I'm happily married. This is not that. It's just, hey, I could see how this could happen with people who were single. and they are looking through the choir library. It's kind of an enemies to lovers thing with them. They don't get along. They instantly dislike each other, but they have to work together because that is literally their job. They are looking through the high school choir library to try to find repertoire for the choirs to sing. And when they are cleaning it out, they find a handwritten piece of music that looks like it was written a while ago, but they don't know who wrote it. They go through it together. They discover it's really, really good. And then the accompanist, who has been there for several years, remembers, oh, there was this student back in 1970 who they said wrote music, and she died during her senior year. I wonder if this was hers. And so they investigate, the past timeline is this heroine that is the composer of the piece, and kind of what she goes through in the 1970s, the early 70s, and it's kind of a narcissistic type relationship that she gets into with another student. So anyway, the little mystery, little suspense. We know the heroine. When we start the book, we know that the heroine. They say she died during her senior year, so they're trying to figure out, well, what happened to her? Was she murdered? Was it natural causes? Was it something else? They don't know. So that's the main plot of this book, and it is scheduled for release from Kriegel sometime in fall of 2025. So about a year from now, which a lot of my readers are saying that's too long, and I'm going, okay, but I have multiple jobs and three kids, and I do what I can.
Yes. Well, that sounds so intriguing. Like my imagination is already spinning, looking forward to.
Yay.
All right. So you are a school choir accompanist, and what do you love about working with the kids?
I love the kids, honestly. Like, that's my favorite part. They're just the place where I work. It's a very small town, and these kids have grown up together. And they're just, I don't know what it is about this place, but these kids are just really, really good kids. Mm-hmm. They're supportive of each other. They're encouraging of each other. Like when we go to solo festival, they just kind of travel in a pack, and they all go and hear each other's solos, and they cheer each other on. And a lot of them play on sports teams with each other. I mean, they literally are just like this big family, and they have welcomed me in. And I have gotten to, I sometimes say that the least important part of my job is the part where I play the piano. And that is true because, yes, I am there playing piano for them every day. And I love that part. I love making music with them. I love seeing, how they go from, okay, they've never seen this music before, to 2 months later, they're on stage knocking it out of the park. They perform so well, and they are just really talented musicians. And you wouldn't think, like, this is a 200-person school. And so the choir is like 30, 40 kids most of the time, but they are just, they're fantastic for the size of the school that they are. They are much better than they have any right to be. So the music part is fun, but my favorite part is just the relationships that I have built with the kids. Like during solo season, I get to interact with them one-on-one, which, as an introvert, that's my favorite way to interact with somebody. I get to know them, and, I've been there. This is my 6th year, and I have been there for I've seen some of my students get baptized. They've invited me to their baptisms. I got to go to one of their weddings this summer. It's a guy that graduated 3 or 4 years ago, and he got married in August, and I was there for that. And I've seen kids, they lose pets. They lose family members. They have, a crisis at school. They're trying to figure out their future. And, some of them, they come to me and they talk, and I'm able to guide them, love them, encourage them. Most of them are believers in this little town, so I can bring my own faith into it and, encourage them that way too, and pray for them. And it's like I have a bunch of kids that aren't mine, but I love them almost as much as I love mine.
Right. That sounds like a very fulfilling job for you.
It really is.
Now, speaking of your own kids, anybody who follows you on social media loves the posts about your children, and you call them the Winlets.
Yes.
So, what is it like being the mom of such a hilarious bunch?
It's kind of buckle up and wear a crash helmet a lot of the time. I never know what they're going to say. I never know what they're going to do. They've been shenanigan prone since they were little bitty. They're really fun and hilarious kids, and a lot of the time I'm just trying to keep up with what they say. Like, okay, say that again. I want to make, and then they now know, like they know I post some of the stuff on Facebook, and sometimes they'll make a wisecrack and won't be like, is that going to go on Facebook, Mom? But they just, I started that, I mean, Facebook and I sort of started about the time I became a mom. So Facebook for me is really just kind of my kids' baby books. Like I didn't have the patience or the time to do like a baby book. So Facebook is kind of how I keep track of my kids as they've grown up. And, you know, it's really fun to look back. And, you know, the little kid years were not my favorite, but and I think that's kind of what inspired me to post their shenanigans, because there was one time I think, the boys, like, they somehow got into the innards of the basement couch, and they pulled out all the stuffing while I was writing. I'm sure that's what I was doing. And they pulled out, and it looked like the entire basement was covered in white cotton fluff. It looked like a blizzard had hit our basement.
Oh, my.
And I just stood there, and I looked at it, and I'm like, okay, someday I will laugh about this. And maybe if I post it on Facebook and make it funny, and other people laugh about it, maybe someday I will laugh about it too. And it worked. I didn't laugh about it until, 2 or 3 years ago. It popped up in my Facebook memories. I'm like, oh, hey, that's funny now. Yeah. It wasn't. It took like a decade, but, it was kind of a stress relief for me as the mom of little kids born closer together than I would have planned for them to be.
Right.
But it's really, really fun now. I really like the teenage years so far.
That's great. And as a consequence of you using it as your baby book, then you also got to share them with the world.
Yes. I've had people tell me, like, I would have left Facebook a really long time ago, except I would have missed the Wenlet posts.
Oh, man. All right. Well, where can readers find you online?
The best place to find me is my website, which is www.amandawen.com. You can sign up for my newsletter there. I have a free short story for new subscribers. And that's where you can find information on books and purchase links and social media and all of that. So, yeah, website, that's the best way.
All right, that sounds good. And readers, definitely go check out Amanda's website. Check out her books. She is an amazing writer, and she covers a lot of great content. And she's also a really great friend. So it's been great to have you here, Amanda.
Oh, thank you. It's been great being here.
I just love visiting with Amanda. She is such a fun person, and her family is really great too. And listeners, remember you can follow me and my own author journey, which is indeed a marathon and not a sprint, but we're looking for the Lord to open the right doors at the right time. You can follow me on Facebook or Instagram at author Erin Mifflin, or you can visit my website, authorerinmifflin.com, to sign up for my newsletter and be the first to hear any news that I might have. And next week, I'm looking forward to bringing you a local author and another good friend, and I hope that you'll tune in and check out her story as well. In the meantime, happy reading!
Join us next week for another episode of The Well-Read Llama with your host, author Erin Mifflin. If you'd like to find out more